Welcome to episode 12 of my Firewood processor build. In this episode, I'm just going to go over all the components I used in the hydraulic system and my understanding of how they work. So I might make some mistakes here. So check the comments. Somebody with more knowledge might correct some of them. But this is the way I understand their functions and what I used them for. I'm not going to include hoses and fittings, stuff like that. It'll just be the major components you kind of see here laid out on this map. So I'll go over each one, and I think I have part numbers and stuff in here, so you'll be able to tell where they came from or how to get them if you want to buy something similar or you've been looking for something and can't find it. So let's get started with the pump. The pump is a 28 gallon per minute 2-stage pump. I got this from Surplus Center. 3,000 psi max, 3,600 RPM max, 7 gallons per minute high pressure, 28 gallons per minute low pressure. Seems like a decent pump so far. Everything's working good with it. No complaints. I think the input suction side was 1.25 inch thread, and then the outlet I think was 1 inch thread. The splitter valve is a Prince Autocycle valve. The one I got was Power Beyond with 3/4 inch national pipe thread. And I think I found out when I was starting to put this video together just to get images, stuff like that, and information, they actually make an SAE one, which I kind of wish I would have got the SAE one. A little easier to deal with the SAE fittings than it is the pipe thread fittings, but it worked out. I have not made any adjustments to this valve. The Autocycle seems to be working okay. I did run the processor for about 3 hours a little while back. I did not film any of it. I figured it would be a good time to just get familiar with the hydraulics and stuff like that to try to get a little quicker at it. But the one D10 is starting to stick for the one, I think it's the left handle. So I got to look into that. I don't know if I need to make an adjustment or if something's just sticking in the D10 in general, dirt maybe, or something got into it. I might have to take it apart and check it. But all in all, the valve works pretty well. It's definitely nice to have on a processor. I still don't think I would end up putting this thing on a wood splitter, but each their own. It is only rated for 25 gallons per minute, so I am likely pushing it past its limit, but I'm not seeing a lot of heat build up, so I don't think it's really causing too much of an issue. It's just something I have to keep an eye on. The plumbing for the Autocycle valve was a little weird. There's 2 ports that have to go to the front of the cylinder. There's one to the rear. On my particular one, I have Power Beyond, and then I have a to tank fitting or to tank port. So here's kind of a diagram of how it's laid out. It's a little hard to find online. I mean, there is a couple on there. It's just not readily available, and Prince doesn't give you instructions with it. At least the one I got had nothing in the box that indicated how it was supposed to be plumbed. So here's a breakdown of how it's supposed to go. The splitter cylinder is a rugged made. It's a 4.5 inch bore, 24 inch stroke, 3 inch rod, and the rod diameter is what gives it its fast return. Just because of the less volume to fill to get the cylinder to return home. Really impressed with this cylinder. The only thing I dislike with it is the ports are on the side of the cylinder. I would have rather them be on the top. And the only way I would have been able to get them on the top is I would have had to done something weird at the base end with the way it mounts, and it just wasn't worth trying to screw with that. So I just left it the way it was. But that would be my only complaint. So far, this cylinder works pretty well, so pretty happy with it. And I'm only pushing it to 2,000 psi. I guess that's what the splitter valve's set at, and I haven't changed that. So, works pretty good so far. Here's the components of the dump valve. And it consists of the body and then the valve itself. The body is a BCL by Sun Hydraulics. That's the model, BCL. And then the actual valve itself is CKEB-XCN. Hopefully the text isn't too small. If you're watching this on a phone or something, the text might be a little small, but it kind of gives you some of the details of it. The biggest thing I found, I got both these components off of eBay. The biggest thing with these two components when you're trying to piece it together is the valve function and the body function. They consider the body a 90-degree manifold. So it basically has 4 openings. One's for the valve, an inlet, an outlet, and then a pressure port. But you can go bigger. This is the 30 gallon per minute setup. I guess you can get up to a 60 gallon per minute setup. There is a guy that sells them ready to go online. You're probably better off reaching out to him. This was really a pain to figure out to put pieces together. But the biggest thing between the manifold and the valve is the cavity, which is a T-2A for this setup. So, like I said, I would look online. There's a guy that sells them ready to go, and for the price he sells them for, I should have just done that in the first place. But these are the two components I use for my dump valve. So the next component in line is the priority flow divider. So basically, from the power beyond port of the splitter valve, I go to the inlet port of this priority flow divider, and then it has 2 outlet ports. One's a controlled flow and one's the excess flow. The controlled flow is 8 gallons per minute. So basically, if I'm pumping 28 gallons per minute through here, 8 gallons per minute comes out the small port, and all the excess goes back to the tank. If I go into high pressure mode, then now the pump's only putting 7 gallons per minute out. So pretty much all of that flow is going through the controlled flow port. And this is just a way, this was kind of a way that I didn't have to buy 30 gallon per minute valves for all those other functions. And it was just kind of easier. And there's even a relief port on this one. I didn't use that. I guess you can adjust it to certain pressure if pressure is exceeded, you'd have to plumb that back to tank. But I'm running the full pressure through everything. The next valve after the priority flow divider is one of my joystick valves. This one runs the saw and the clamp. When I first got these valves, I tried to put the float function all on one valve by taking some stuff apart, and you can't do that, unfortunately. The way the internals are is different. So I know I wanted my clamp to be able to float and my log lift to float. So I was going to have the lift and the clamp all in one, and then the saw and the infeed all on one. And I think my logic behind that was basically so that I couldn't run, or less likely to run the infeed while I was running the saw. But I didn't end up having to do that, or couldn't do that because I couldn't move the float function. So the first one here is going to be the saw and the clamp. There's the model number and some specs on that valve. These are not, I've not adjusted anything on any of the valves as far as pressures. It looks like these ones are already factory set at 2500, which I might end up turning up my splitter to that. I did order some gauges and stuff. I'll do an install on them later on down the line. So my feed to my saw goes through a flow control valve and a pressure relief valve. The flow control valve is the same one I use on, I think I have 4 in total. I use this same valve. Basically, it allows flow in one direction, or controlled flow in one direction, free flow in the opposite direction. I am running 2 of these on the saw, one on the feed, or one on the down and one on the up, just to slow the up down. Yeah. And the pressure relief valve. So my flow goes from my joystick valve to the flow control valve to the pressure relief valve. And I think I might change that around and have the pressure relief valve first. I would assume the flow control valves create a pressure spike. And I'm thinking if I put the pressure relief first, then there won't be as much of a pressure rise that'll bog the engine down some. I don't know. I'm thinking that the flow control valve has to be causing the pressure to go up prior to that valve because it's slowing the flow down, but I could be wrong. I'm going to look a little more into that. So I might end up switching around that as it comes out of the joystick valve, it goes through the pressure relief valve, then through the flow control, and then to the saw cylinder. But like I said, my first tests of the processor, I never made any adjustments to this pressure relief valve. I have since turned it down all the way as low as it'll go, and it does seem to be working pretty well. I could probably still stall out the engine but it was prior to adjusting this down as low as it would go, it was a lot easier. Now it's a little harder to stall out. So, I mean, these two components are working together pretty well for the saw function, so I'm happy with that. But here's the 2 components that I used. Both of them are from Surplus Center. Pretty much everything other than the splitter cylinder and some stuff that I found used was all from Surplus Center and can be found on their website. The saw cylinder, I went with the smallest cylinder I could find is basically what I did as far as the piston size. And reason being is the smaller the cylinder I could get, even with higher pressure, it would be less force. A lot of the stuff I read online said it's supposed to be like 50 pounds of force at the center of the bar for cutting, process, or whatever. There was no way I could get down to that. So 1-inch cylinder was the smallest I could get. And it's working out pretty well. So there are calculators online. Basically, you take the piston size and then your pressure, and that'll tell you how much force. From there, you just find like a Fulcrum calculator to figure out if you're applying this much force at this point how much force you're going to have at said distance away. And I'm above where I wanted to be, but I tried to get it as low as I possibly could. If you could get a smaller cylinder, it would be even better. I don't know if you can get much smaller than 1 inch. This thing's tiny, but it seems fine. It seems rugged enough for what it's doing. So this is the cylinder I went with, also from Surplus Center. This is the cylinder I used for the clamp. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into this cylinder. I just picked one based on the length. It's an 1.5-inch bore. I thought I needed a 14-inch stroke. It turned out a little weird. It's working just fine. I probably needed a longer stroke based on where I thought I was going to mount it. I'm not really sure. I mean, it worked fine. So I'm not using any flow control or anything on this. Don't really need it. Worst case, I'm slamming it. If I'm going too fast, I'm just slamming it into a log, so it's not really hurting anything. But here's the specs on that one. My second valve is the same joystick as the previous one. Then from there, to run the infeed, it goes through this cushion valve. My understanding with this is because I'm using a cylinder valve, when you stop hydraulic flow, it can cause a harsh stop of the motor, and this is supposed to suppress that hard stop. I have not made any adjustments to this. I don't know if I need to make any adjustments to it. I wouldn't really know how to. Everything's working fine, so I'm just going to say that it's adjusted properly, but I'm sure someone could explain it a little better, but I don't know if I really need to do anything with it because everything seems to be working for the most part pretty well, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Here's the motor I used for the infeed. This was salvaged off an overhead crane that was in a trailer. These are the specs I could find based on the part number that I could find on the tag. And then off of these specs, you can find calculators online that'll give you, it'll tell you RPMs and torque, stuff like that, based off of flow and pressures. And then I just kind of use that to figure out inches per minute, feet per minute, to figure out what my sprocket size would be. I didn't write any of that stuff down, but I kind of tried to gauge, like I wanted it to move 20 inches in a second or something like that. And I got it pretty close. If I full bore the handle on it, it moves a little quicker than I want it to, but you just kind of have to feather it. But the motor actually worked out really well. It's got plenty of power, so happy with saving quite a bit of money on having to buy a motor. The cylinder I used for the log lift, I don't have any specs on it. It didn't have a part number on it, anything like that. It's a 2.5-inch piston, I know that, and then it has just a weird stroke. It's, I think, 33 inches, something off the wall. It was probably custom for something. I don't know what it came off of. All I know is it worked. So I went with it. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I assumed it would based on the 2.5-inch piston. It moves plenty quick enough to lift the log. I've lifted a log already that my tractor really won't get up off the ground very well, so I know it at least lifts more than what my tractor can, so that works for me, because for the most part, any logs that I can't lift with my tractor, I'm not moving around anyways, or if they're too big in diameter, they won't fit through the processor, so that would be why that cylinder is not pictured here, and I don't have any specs for it. The last valve is what I'm using for the wedge lift, or the adjustable wedge. It's just a simple one spool valve. I have it set up for open center. I can convert it to power beyond down the road if I need to add any, like a valve for the live deck, if I end up doing a live deck or anything else of that nature. So this was just a simple valve, and if you watch the videos of my install, kind of worked out the way I mounted it with the handle pointing towards me. I think it makes it a little more intuitive as to what it controls. From this valve, I am running a flow control valve. A lot of the videos I watched of, wood splitters and stuff like that people built, their wedges were always, it seemed like they moved way too fast. So flow control was definitely something I wanted to put on the wedge to keep that a little easier to fine tune and not have it jumping all over the place. Here's the cylinder for the adjustable wedge. The main thing I looked for when I bought this cylinder was that the rod was no bigger than 1 inch, because my wedge is 1 inch. And then I only needed a 4-inch stroke. So that all worked out pretty well. This could have been a 1-inch piston, but I don't think I could find one. It didn't need to be 1.5 inches, but I mean, it all worked out. I just have it mounted at a single point, and then I'm just sliding my wedges over top of the rod. So it worked out pretty good with this cylinder so far, anyways. So this is the one I went with. So that pretty much wraps up the hydraulic system. Everything but the plumbing and the tank I tried to include. Hopefully this video helps somebody who's looking to build even a wood splitter or something like that. Just knowing some of the components, maybe it'll save some time in the research. This video definitely went a little longer than I thought it would, but hope you enjoyed it. The next video I put out for the processor, I'm definitely going to make sure I do some of it actually running. Like I said, I did do about 3 hours cutting the one weekend with it. I didn't film it. There was some family and friends stopping by, and I just never ended up filming it. So I'm going to try to get some logs collected again and try to do another few hours or so of running it, and try to get some footage of that and put that together. Like I said, I ordered some gauges. I still got to figure out the rest of the fittings and the hoses I need for the gauges, but that'll probably be in the next video as well. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and that way you'll know when the next one comes out. Thanks.